the fastest growing international crime network that the world has ever seen. It has already passed the illegal arms trade, and soon it's gonna pass the drug trade. Because you can sell a bag of cocaine one time to a child 5 to 10 times a day. God's children are not for sale.
Por rescatar niños, ¿verdad? Puedes ayudarme a encontrar mi hermana.
Te lo prometo. Imagine walking into a room right now, seeing an empty bed. What we do?
You quit your job, and you go and rescue those kids.
So at this moment, she could be a block down the road, or she could be in Moscow, Bangkok, LA.
What if this was your daughter?
So Kevin, I just went and watched the movie Sound of Freedom, and as a dad of a daughter, and I know you too, man, it sort of scared me, but also having a son and what I saw happening there, I thought, man, that's tragic what is happening in Central America and those areas, and I thought, man, I'm so glad that that's not happening here.
Well, it's actually a very common misconception, especially in a community as safe as the city of Oxford. Because of our proximity to I-20, and we also have 430, 121, a lot of interstate and interstate thoroughfares, we actually combat a lot of issues with trafficking in general. So a lot of people usually associate trafficking with narcotics or counterfeit goods, but we actually have a very big issue dealing with human trafficking. We also deal with not only sex trafficking, but just indentured servitude and just trafficking individuals who are somehow indebted to the person that is trafficking them in order to pay off a debt or into something like sex slavery. And because of our proximity, we're able to track victims coming all the way from the border all the way to the East Coast, and then once you get to like Atlanta and other areas, you have hubs and other corridors where these individuals are trafficked all across the world coming through the U.S. One of the most unknown things is that the U.S. is one of the largest consumers of trafficking of humans, whether it be for sex, indentured servitude, anything where that person is working against their will for someone else's common goal and attributes. Specifically for the agency that I work for, we specialize in trying to identify these individuals who are either being trafficked or consumers of trafficking services to one, push this out of our community, but also to try to rescue as many people as we possibly can throughout the year.
So you mean this could be happening in our backyard?
This happens in our backyard. One of the things that we see, especially in the media, where people are becoming more and more acceptant of non-traditional sexual deviancy. And so you see more and more people being bolder when it comes to victimizing individuals. And one of the common misconceptions is that the only people we really got to worry about is young ladies, young girls. But we have sexual deviants that are preying on their real perverted carnal desires, where they're going after prepubescent kids, young kids, and individuals as young as 2 or 3 years old that are becoming victims of sex trafficking. And when you look at the impact of people coming across the border basically unchecked, we really have no way of knowing familial ties, and just by a group of people with children coming across that could potentially be victims of sex trafficking and human trafficking in general when it comes to the grand scheme of things.
So Kevin, what are some things that we can look for that indicate this is going on in our community?
Being properly educated in what human trafficking is, some of the signs, because you have so many different types of trafficking. It's not just sex trafficking. It can be indentured servitude, anything from removing children from their real families and being put into unofficial adoption scenarios. And so there are a lot of resources that the general public at large that they can have access to as far as looking for signs, looking for things. One of the things with our hyper-aware culture is we don't want to be offensive to people and have false alarms, but there are things that you can do as far as training and making sure that law enforcement knows that, hey, this is potentially a problem. These are the things that I saw. I just want to make sure it's documented and potentially save a life. There are a lot of common misconceptions when it comes to what trafficking looks like and some of the elements, and it's really important to do the research, have the understanding and knowing what things to look for. One, so that we aren't creating false scenarios. In our community, we've seen from time to time on social media where there'll be a post about somebody sex trafficking in the area based on obscure elements, as far as somebody put a piece of paper on my car or trying to sex traffic me. But when we're looking at the real signs and true intentions of some of these offenders, making sure that we know exactly what to look for, what some of the signs are. And we personally work with the agency that I'm with, several private organizations that will do that training. The city of Oxford itself is a trafficking-free zone, and so we have a lot of resources for our businesses and the public at large to learn about what does trafficking look like and how we as a community can respond and help out.
So Kevin, knowing all that, what are some specific things that we as Christians can be praying for that would help turn this around in our nation and in our community?
So when we're talking about praying specifically, the biggest thing for us as believers is really just to do our due diligence, to be aware of the atrocities that go on in our own local communities. As we've seen time and time again, even the smallest amount of believers, when they come together for a common goal, we've seen God do very powerful things in the life of the people or situations and circumstances that we're praying for. So specifically, just really praying for those souls and individuals who are going through these tough times, who are being trafficked, who really don't have a way of seeing anything outside of the circumstances that they're in, and just praying for comfort, praying for understanding, and then more specifically, praying that we can properly equip our law enforcement partners, pray for our government that they would make the right decisions, do the right thing, so that we can be properly equipped, one, to turn our country away from being a really big consumer of this of trafficking in general, but also giving us the tools and resources that we need in order to essentially go out and hunt these offenders. I've heard estimates that the trafficking business in itself is in excess of about $50 billion a year globally. And so you look at even little old Oxford, Alabama, or even the state of Alabama itself, we can only do so much. We only have so much funding. And so just praying that, we get the proper training, the proper tools, the proper equipment. Even if we save one life a year, that's one life that we're able to take away from just a life of just misery. And we go as far as being slave labor when it comes to trying to keep costs down, all the way up to people who are being sex trafficked. And we're talking about the youngest of these individuals that we have in our community. And the more we can give those individuals comfort, knowing that, hey, you may be in a bad circumstance now, but with the proper funding, with the proper support from our local, state, and federal governments, there are people out there that are actually looking for these individuals and putting them in a better and safer environment.